And a very good evening to you, and welcome to today's edition of Politics 101. It's our midweek edition, Wednesday evening. Want to welcome you wherever you're joining us from, whether you are in Guyana, in the wider Caribbean, North America, Europe, or whether you are joining us from the South American continent, Suriname, French Guyana, Brazil. Welcome to Politics 101. And please share the link. Tonight we are going to be talking about the topic which has been quite in the news, a lot in the news, sorry. That is the topic of whether our various ethnic groups should be granted a month to celebrate their heritage. At present, we know that our Amerindian brothers and sisters celebrate Heritage Month, but none of the other ethnic groups are officially designated a month. The debate was, of course, sparked by the recent holiday that was observed, Arrival Day. And our Indian Guyanese commentators and spokespersons have argued that it should be called India Arrival Day rather than just simply Arrival Day, because it was East Indians who arrived on that day, that Portuguese first arrived at a different date in January, I think, and that Chinese arrived at another day. And thus, May 5th should be Indian Arrival Day. And others have gone further to argue that the month of May should be designated Indian Arrival Month or Indian Heritage Month. African Guyanese, of course, Emancipation Day, 1st of August, is set aside to observe the end of emancipation. Sorry, the end of slavery, what we call Emancipation Day. And lots of people think that that day was there all the time. We used to celebrate August Monday, not Emancipation Day. And that was changed, of course, when we did the 150th anniversary of the end of slavery in Guyana, because of the United Nations designation, 1984 to 1988. Because, of course, you know, the Emancipation Proclamation was in 1834, but there was that period of apprenticeship from 1834 to 1838. And so it was not until 1838 proper that African Guyanese actually were released from bondage in a formal way. And so the United Nations designated 1984 to 1988 for a recognition of 150 years, the end of slavery. I remember well, It was under the PNC government, and they had set up, I think, a cultural commission. It was chaired by Professor Vibert Cambridge. And I remember very well, it was an all-party commission. Dr. Rupert Rupnarayan represented the WP, and I was an alternate, meaning that when he was not present, I attended meetings. So I remember that well, 1984 to 1988. And I stress it was under the PNC government of that time, and it was an all-party commission. The WPA at that time was not even a parliamentary party, but we were invited to be part of that. And I want to put that on the table as we enter this discussion. There were lectures. I know UC Guyana did 2 lectures, one on Indians and one on African arrival. At the University of Guyana, I think Dr. Chelly Jagan gave a lecture, and the PNC representative at that time on the commission was the late Derek Bernard, who was then Minister of Education. Hamilton Green, who's one of our guests tonight, will remember that commission quite well, I think, the historian that he is. But the question of whose holidays are recognized is always a very important question in a plural society, an ethnically plural society, because holidays are considered cultural values. Cultural values. We talk about economic values, we talk about political values. They're also cultural values. And one of the cultural values is whose holidays are the national holidays. In these plural societies, we are challenged either to have a dominant group whose holidays become the holiday, the national holiday, or we have several holidays. A lot of times, my students and non-Guyanese will ask, why do you all have so many holidays? And I have to explain to them, well, we have many ethnic groups. The colonials didn't bother with ethnic holidays. Long before there were African holidays in Guyana, there were Indian religious holidays under the early PNC. Hindu holidays, Diwali, Muslim holidays, Yumanabi and so forth. These were long before African holidays. The first African holiday, like I said, came in 1984. And so we've always had to grapple with the question of heritage and how do we celebrate that heritage. Like the other Caribbean countries, at the time of independence, we came up with all-inclusive mottos: one people, one nation, one destiny. In Jamaica, they say out of many comes one. It's aspirational. But even as we aspire towards one nation and one culture, we still have to recognize the diversity. And so here we are in 2022, facing the same question that we faced in 1966. How do we apportion cultural values in this society? Whose music becomes the national music? Should there be a single national music? Whose dance forms We had a situation in Trinidad and Tobago where Ras Shorty I, formerly Lord Short U, the inventor of soca music. And what he sought to do was to bring together the African calypso beat with the Indian beat to create what became known as the soul of calypso, soca. National unity music. Of course, many people still saw soca as an African music, although it's really a blend of African and Indian beats. Later on, we would have the chutney soca, which our Indian Guyanese brothers and sisters embrace fully. They did not embrace soca music, they didn't see it as cross-cultural music. The point I'm making here, it has been difficult to have a single cultural expression because one way or the other, it would be owned by one of the ethnic groups. And so the question remains, how do we deal with the question of heritage? Are we sufficiently one people, one nation, one destiny that we can do away with observances of a particular ethnic group? These are some of the questions that we are going to address tonight. These are some of the questions we're going to address tonight. After the call for an Indian Heritage Month, Tacuma Ogunseye, member of the WPA, but on this issue, long-standing member of ASCREA, came out and openly supported Indian Heritage Day. That's why he's on tonight, because he has had time to think about this issue. Hamilton Green, former Prime Minister under the PNC, would have been there when some of the early interventions were made in terms of creating a multicultural or multi-ethnic tapestry. He has voiced support for that diversity. Note our Indian brothers and sisters have called for an Indian Arrival Month, assuming that there's already Black History Month. Not knowing there's no Black History Month in Guyana. There's Black History Month in the United States of America in February, Black History Month in England, the United Kingdom in October. Canada has their own Black History Month. We in Guyana do not have a Black History Month, but our brothers and sisters assume that. Unofficially, some of us see the month of August as a month when we highlight African contribution to Guyana, but it's not official. Our society has always had to grapple between the collective and the individual. We have not always done a good job at it. This morning I was on Bostonian Morning Time, and I was making the point that some African people are quite comfortable dancing to chutney soca, but they have a problem dancing to African revival music. They call it obia. They're going to catch anta banta. And I was pointing out to the host that they're not stupid, that they see chutney music as celebrating Guyana. But they see real African music in sometimes negative terms. So they get into the notion that you have to give up African in order to embrace Guyanese or Guyana. Not that you can be both. We've always had to grapple with that question, how to be African and Guyanese, how to be Indian and Guyanese, how to be Amerindian and Guyanese, Chinese, Portuguese. And I think it's fair to say that Africans, more than others, feel that you have to give up your ethnic heritage in order to embrace your national heritage. Mistakenly so, I think. I don't think the other ethnic groups have that problem. And I made the point that the burden of creating a unified Guyanese culture is not the burden of one ethnic group. All ethnic groups have to give up something for that. Often, African Guyanese think that it is their burden. They're the ones who have to always show that they're Guyanese, often at the expense of being African. The question is, where does African begin or African stop and Guyanese begin? Where does Indian stop and Guyanese begin? Where does Amerindian or Chinese or Portuguese stop and Guyanese begin? Should we get rid of all Indian holidays and African holidays, all Indian religious holidays? Should we only have Guyanese holidays? I bet you if any government goes there, they're going to be bawled down, they're going to be shouted down. But yet we say we must not recognize race. We must only recognize being Guyanese. It's not always easy to build one personality, one national personality out of ethnic groups, especially ethnic groups in conflict. Take, for example, the national consensus meeting that is constitutionally demanded that the opposition leader and the president meet on questions of national appointment and so forth. Constitution. The Constitution assumes that at a minimum, all Guyanese ethnic groups and their organization agree on something called Guyana, at a minimum. Because that meeting is intended to arrive at consensus. So the Constitution is assuming that we have moved towards one people, one nation, one destiny, and that there's a minimum of consensus. Alas, in 2022, there is not even a minimum of consensus between the two major ethnic groups and their parties. They agree on literally nothing. But the Constitution assumes that agreement. And that is why when Mr. Norton met with Mr. Ali, some commentators are pointing out that Norton was made to look like a baggage boy. Sitting down, waiting and parking outside. He was not treated with the state and the national dignity, which means that the PPP does not see him as an equal. And people are already saying those talks are doomed to failure because they are not being approached in the spirit of consensus and national cohesion. So you see where culture is important. The Black Stallion, in making his plea for Caribbean integration, argued for cultural integration as the basis for Caribbean integration. He says, we can't have politics as the basis for cultural for Caribbean integration because we disagree on politics. Barbados protects its own sovereignty. Jamaica does. Guyana does. St. Kitts, St. Vincent, etc. Antigua. Stalin says the one thing we have in common is that we come from the same place on the same ship. And so if we're going to come together in a cultural, in a regional integration, it must be based on the culture. Of course, Stalin had an argument, a public argument with Dr. Eric Williams, who said he didn't make allowance for Indians. And Stalin argued, yes, he was basically saying that the African experience was so profound to the Caribbean that if you take it away, you're left with no Caribbean. But the profound point he was making was that cultural integration must be the basis of Caribbean integration. And if we take the Black Stalin thesis and we bring it to Guyana, then we are saying among our ethnic groups, if we cannot achieve some kind of cultural oneness out of our cultural diversity, then our Guyanese nationalism is in trouble. So all these complex points are important in this discourse. Where do I stand? I've always believed in ethnic equity as the basis for ethnic unity. I don't think we will have ethnic oneness. That has not happened anywhere in the world, but we can have ethnic unity. And I think the more equitable we distribute our resources, not only economic resources and political resources, but our cultural resources, the more equitable the distribution of resources, the closer we will come towards an ethnically diverse nation state. And so in that regard, I support that all ethnic groups, regardless of their size, if you're giving one a month, you have to give all a month. Africans and Indians and Amerindians. And it is not because Chinese and Portuguese are smaller in numbers, they should also get a month. They should also get a month. You know, we struggle in Guyana to deal with the question of racism because it is what is keeping us apart. We come to tonight on the show, as we did last night, those of us who are African mourning our dead in the United States of America. A young man traveled miles to go to kill people in Buffalo in a supermarket because they're Black, they're African. That Black people all over the world are in danger, their lives are in danger because they're Black. It's permanent, wherever they are. And we live in a world in which Black people are prohibited from warning the world that they are in danger. Every time we open our mouth to tell the world, look, we are in danger because we are Black. They shut us up and tell us we are racist. Think in Guyana. And Hamilton Green or Tacuma Ogunseye said they want a month for Africans. They'll be called racist. Our Indian brothers can say it. And people say they're constructive. We say it, we are racist. Let us call a spade a spade. When last you opened your newspaper, when was the last year, and heard that an Indian man was shot dead by police who invaded his home at 4 o'clock in the morning and killed him in front of his wife. When last you hear one of our Indian brothers being arrested and being killed while he's in a police car? When last you've heard an Indian sister being spat upon and called an ugly monkey? The reality is that that happens in Guyana almost singly to black people. And we have to ask the question, why? Why? All of us are oppressed groups, but why does it happen to this one group? And the answer is simple. Because the society permits it to happen. The society shuts us up. The only defense ethnic groups have against ethnic assault is to always keep it public. When the Jews, every day, every opportunity, they get to talk about the Holocaust, they talk about it. Not because they like the word Holocaust, but because they want to say to the world, we put this in your face so you never forget it, and that you never do it to us again. But when we Africans talk about slavery, we are shut up and we are told that's long past and gone. And we hear young black people with it more than probably the others. The others say it quietly, but it's young black people, some older ones, but mostly young black people you hear. We must not look back. We must look to the future. The most backward statement you can make in a society like Guyana. We are shut up. If we write about racial or black violence, anti-black racism, out from your letter in the newspaper. Sometimes they don't carry the letter. They prohibit our political party, the political party that black people have given most of their votes to. They prohibit that party from talking about race. So the PNC as a political party does not defend African people. That died when Burnham died. I was making the point this morning that I don't expect the leader of the PNC to come out and talk about race in the same way as I talk about race. But that party has to be cognizant of policies. When Burnham did urban housing, he didn't have to say black housing for black people. He had a policy of urban housing. When the NIS and the cooperative bank and the cooperative this and all of that was set up by the early PNC. They didn't have black before them, but at that time the party was conscious of its responsibility to those souls who go out every 5 years and put their X next to the party's symbol. And I was making the point this morning that the person who was put to chair a lot of those committees, whether it is the cooperative bank or cooperative scheme or the NIS or GMC or whatever, was the most militant black man in Guyana at the time. Burnham put him to chair those committees. It's a way of ensuring that black people were left behind, that now that they voted for a government, the government recognized that they must get a place. And when the government and party couldn't do it directly, it did it indirectly. And I'm saying the Burnham model, which was the Eric Williams model and the Barrow model, is still the model of our party balances its ethnic responsibility and its national responsibility. The PNC didn't tear down sugar and rice. What it did was to lift up pig rearing. It didn't tear down Indian housing that was granted to them by the estate. but it implements urban housing to balance. And the last time we got power in 2050 to 2020, we adopted a one boat lifts all, and yes, Black people benefited from that one boat fits all, but there was nothing that was directly targeted, directly or indirectly, to the African Guyanese community. Look at the PPP. They took two enemies, communism and race. Communism stress class is a racist false consciousness. But the PPP was able to take communism and race and turn it into practice. Since Jack and dead, they've taken capitalism. Capitalism talks about colorblindness, but the PPP merged capitalism and racism together. And they're governing with that praxis. But our party, since Burnham died, has not been creative enough to recognize that the challenge is to try for a balance between the ethnic security of your base and the security of Guyana as a whole. It's not an easy thing to do. It calls for thought, it calls for understanding of history, it calls for understanding of your people, it calls for understanding of policy, it calls for understanding of statecraft, and I think there is a laziness in our contemporary political people who think politics is jumping on a stage and making a nice speech and not thought. We have political leaders who do not understand the history of Guyana, contemporary history, much more long history, do not understand the history of political thought. And so they cannot deal with a simple issue. Well, not simple, as I said, it's not simple, but they cannot deal with the challenge of ethnic diversity and ethnic unity, what Professor Nettleford calls chaos in order and order in chaos. How do we, out of ethnic division, bring about ethnic unity? If ethnic division is chaos, how do we bring about ethnic unity, which is order? How do we maintain that order of ethnic unity in a larger politics of ethnic disunity, order in chaos? What the old Marxists will call the dialectics. Before I bring in my panelists for the interview, I want you to look at a piece by Professor Eddie Glaude, reflecting on what I've been trying to talk about for the last couple of minutes. How the society silences racial injustice. We talk about democracy, free and fair election, oil contract, local content, constitutional reform. And we talk about those things as if they're colorblind. Or in Boston is killed, and oh, we can prevent that from happening tomorrow if we have police reform. Not if we have reform in the way we think. The way we think about the meaning of blackness. We don't go there. We talk about the working class. As though we have one working class. And that working class is not influenced by ethnicity. Look at May Day. Some unions gone that way, some unions gone this way. Martin Carter said, well, those who run one way and those who run another way, speaking about 1962. We're still doing that, and we still refuse to engage the notion of race and racism. And so Orrin Boston could be killed. Janet Bullers could be spat upon, called a monkey. Today, the DPP dismissed a personal charge. The police didn't bring a personal charge against the man who allegedly spat on her. She did. And the DPP threw out her charge. And Diana continues to march because, oh, she's just another citizen. What happened to her is by the way. So the DPP throw it out, throw it. When a society silences itself on the most dangerous threat to its being, when the society silences itself on that, it allows that threat to go unnoticed and unchallenged. Eddie Glaude, Professor Eddie Glaude, if my operator can just get that ready for us, we will look
America's
at
not
Professor
unique in its
Oz.
sins. As a country, we're not unique in our evils, to be honest with you. I think where we may be singular is our refusal to acknowledge them. And the legends and myths we tell about our inherent, goodness to hide and cover and conceal so that we can maintain a kind of willful ignorance that protects our innocence. See, the thing is that when the Tea Party was happening, we were saying, pundits, oh, it's just about economic populism. It's not about race. When people knew, social scientists were already writing that what was driving the Tea Party were anxieties about demographic shifts, that the country was changing, that they were seeing these racially ambiguous babies on Cheerios commercials, that the country wasn't quite feeling like it was a white nation anymore. And people were screaming from the top of their lungs, yo, this is not just simply economic populism. This is the ugly underbelly of the country. See, the thing is this, and I'll say this and I'll take the hit on it. There are communities that have had to bear the brunt of America confronting, white Americans confronting the danger of their innocence. And it happens every generation. So somehow we have to kind of, oh my God, is this who we are? And just again, here's another generation of babies. Think about it, the 2-year-old had his bones broken by 2 parents trying to shield him from being killed. A woman who has been married to this man for as long as I've been on the planet almost, lost her husband. For what? And so what we know is that the country has been playing politics for a long time on this hatred. We know this. So it's easy for us to place it all on Donald Trump's shoulders. It's easy for us to place Pittsburgh on his shoulders. It's easy for me to place Charlottesville on his shoulders. It's easy for us to place El Paso on his shoulders. This is us. And if we're going to get past this, we can't blame it on him. He's a manifestation of the ugliness that's in us. I've had the privilege of growing up in a tradition that didn't believe in the myths and the legends because we had to bear the brunt of them. Either we're going to change, Nicole, or we're going to do this again and again, and babies are going to have to grow up without mothers and fathers, uncles and aunts, friends, while we're trying to convince white folk to finally leave behind a history that will maybe, or embrace a history that might set them free from being white. Finally.
What else?
Lord help us.
Lord help us. So many, we have to shed tears almost every day. Professor Eddie Glaude is a professor. He studied Black history, Black studies. He's an Africana study professor. And when we have to teach that kind of stuff and deal with it, You get emotional. How many times we have to cry? And you can easily take out United States from what he's saying there and put Guyana. Guyana. God help us. Interview tonight. Hamilton Green, Tacuma Ogunseye. Brothers, welcome to Politics 101.
Well, David, it's a pleasure to be with the senior politician, you know, and a person who have contributed immensely to what Guyana is today. So it's nice to share the program with him.
Brother Ami, welcome. We're not hearing you. You have to put on your audio. The audio, we're not hearing you. The audio, we're not hearing you.
Are you hearing me now?
Yes, yeah. Yes, we're hearing you now.
Good. I'm on now?
Yes, you're on now. Welcome.
Thank you, David. Your analysis was both perfect and profound. But I like to break a lance with you on the present proposal. It may have value and virtue. But if you take account of the very things you said, what I think is urgently needed at this time, particularly among the descendants of the manumitted Africans, is a process which you have started among our young people so that we can inform them, educate them, and give them the stimulus to agitate so that we can be liberated and reach the point where we can effectively talk about a month for each ethnic group. When you said that what we face is a form, the ugly spectre of racism and capitalism, you are correct. And this is the challenge we need to deal with today. If we allow our energies to be diverted to talking about a month for Africans, Portuguese, Chinese, and what have you, that is what the arch enemy wants. It is my view that David Hines, Tacuma, and others need to concentrate our resources, our time, to get our young people, our young teachers, our young teenagers, particularly, and I make no apologies, of African descent, to understand the challenge, to understand the threat that they face in this country, and give them the bunks, as I said, to deal with an enemy who believe that they are the result of the old imperial master. We face, some may feel, a one-man dictatorship or the emergence of a mono-ethnic oligarchy. These are serious matters. And I suggest, David, that we concentrate over the next period to bring on board our young people before we speak about a month for each ethnic group. Because when you do that, you direct the dialogue away from the major socio-economic issues and the challenges that face young Black people. I was speaking today to a young Afro housewife. She cannot make ends meet. On that same day, I'm speaking to young Afro females who've got to work sometimes 12 hours for the minimum wage. as security guards and others, because the structure is not in place to support them. Some of these young women have to work at night, and their children are left virtually unattended because most of our men, let's face it, are missing in action. And that is one of the things we need to concentrate on. Together, young men and not so young men, to take up their responsibility in this challenge that faces us every day. And what bothers me, I was in the West Coast of this a week ago, and some of the young people there, they're not so young, were completely unaware of opportunities offered to them and seem to have surrendered so that they almost accept the status of being an underclass. And you're aware that throughout the modern world, even before the end of slavery, for some historical reasons, the European masters, the European imperialists, painted a picture which still exists of the African, as Dr. Jagan once said, being at the bottom of the ladder, and worse, that is his rightful place. In my dining room, I have a painting which is instructive by Phil Edwards. He's now dead. It shows on the one side the African facing the other group. At first, I thought this was an unkind bit of painting, but I bought it because it is the truth. And that African who's facing the other people need to have the strength, the spiritual strength, to be able to make sacrifices, to understand what deferred gratification means, so that we can talk about this 1 month story. In summary, I feel it has its value, its virtue, but at this time in a polarized society, it will be used by those who control the propaganda machinery as, for them, a useful diversion from us dealing with the gut issues. Then our young people stimulated, our young mothers understanding the importance of education. And I say no more. I think you understand the situation much more than I do. In summary, whatever may be the values and virtues of those proposals, I think it will form a distraction from concentrating on the major issue. We're going to dress up an African month, and at the end of the day, prices go up. We've still been exploited, and now women have to do all the menial jobs. And you see what is happening? The oil people, who are the descendants of our slave masters, don't mind securing the support, open for commerce, of a few of us. The old house slave mentality is at work. And my friends, I have the highest regard for you, David and Tacuma. Let us sit down and work out means to educate, inform our young people and make no apologies, so that they'll be stimulated and agitated to confront an enemy who may not understand words, And you remember, last Emancipation Day, His Excellency President Ali sought in his message to the Africans to equate slavery with indentureship. This absurdity, when brought to his attention, he sought to correct it or apologize. But what we heard from him was a prepared text and tells you the mindset of those people. To disregard the suffering of our ancestors, it means nothing, and that slavery is just another event, no different from indentureship, forgetting We civilized the entire coast by hand, opened the interior, and today you have an administration where our gold, which our folk knockers found, are being harvested, and the majority of profit is going to the other people. These are things we need to talk about and concentrate on at this point of time. So that is my contribution this time. We need to move forward.
Brother Ogun, your opening remarks, bringing together my own introduction, Professor Glaud's piece, and your initial take on the question that is posed to us tonight.
Okay, I want to disagree with Comrade Green. While I agree with him that we have to continue focus on educating our people to understand the political challenges in the equation, I don't believe that discussing cultural things amounts to a distraction. You see, we here with a different conception of politics. I mean, I came from a Askria background in which my political activism was directed and influenced by my cultural activism, the consciousness I got in understanding cultural realities. And I think one of the deficiencies of African mass politics, and it was reflected in the early PNC and in the challenge of building a nation, is that we use a Eurocentric approach to politics, which separate politics from culture. And in a society in which we are the most culturally destroyed historically, given slavery and colonialism, we're up against an Indian community that has more cohesion culturally, which is reflected in their political behavior and strengthen their politics. If you look at African political behavior, the question of identity is still for us a crisis. Many educated Africans who have been educated in the European and North American university still argue that they're not African. And this whole question of Guyanese and African has its roots in the early days of independence when we're trying to shape a nation. And I think that the PNC, despite all the positive things you cite about Burnham and the PNC, which is true, they effectively, and I remember it, when we in Askria were trying to promote African culture as a way of strengthening African politics, when it helps them, it's okay. But when they feel it is being threatening them, then they outlaw the African consciousness in the politics. And in all the debates about building Guyana and a nation, you know, the PNC argue and fight us down that what is important is to promote Guyanization. And in their conception, Guyanization was paramount, and Africanism, was secondary. And we still suffer from it. Among you discuss with African people, and most of them, their political consciousness is shaped by the PNC, and it reflects the same thing. And whereas if you go to Africans who are schooled by the Askria ideology, our politics is influenced by a commitment to the African people, first and foremost, and to bring that commitment to the nation. We have always took the position that the Guyanese nation will be as strong as the ethnic communities are. So for us, strengthening the African nation is strengthening the Guyanese nation. And I say all of this to answer the question that yes, while we have to emphasize, and we do emphasize, because the most of the discussion among African people is the conventional political discussion, which Comrade Green is asking for. 8% of the discourse is that. And what we're doing here represents less than 1% of the public engagement of Africans. So to me, I don't see it as undermining, the political discourse or being sidetracked. In fact, I see it as strategic. And let me go to my response to the letter which the Indian brother had wrote about this Indian arrival day and so forth and so forth. When I saw the letter, okay, I respond to it as an African activist who have had a history of dealing with these ethnic problems in Guyana and who have also become a victim, okay, of Indian racism and the PPP, deliberate attack to stain us as racists, ignoring the fact that Ogunseye was one of the early Africans who, from the Askria platform, used to join with them, keeping meetings in Berbice. I slept in mosquito-infested PPP offices in Berbice. They forget all of that. And they deem you racist. And given their control of the media and the way in which they cite the population, Ogunseye, David Hines are seen racist. They forget that David Hines was one of the cultural activists from Askria who worked very closely with the PPP cultural groups and all kinds of things, And I felt that we, as African activists and African leaders, have a duty to demonstrate to this country and the world that there's a difference between African cultural persons, how we perceive politics and nation, that is different from the Indian political leadership and a lot of the Indian cultural activists. And I deliberately, willfully decided to write that letter because it is a natural part of my evolution, cultural evolution and political evolution, that we have equity on these cultural matters. And hopefully in having ethnic equity and understanding, we'll also begin to build bases or could deal with the wider political questions. And I want to be dead honest. I made that concession in my way of thinking is that I know I have to fight ding-dong battles with the PPP and the Indian community on African interests coming down the road. I'm realistic. But at the same time, I know I have a duty, okay, to demonstrate to the Indian community and the world that this is not simply a racial battle or a racist battle, but this is what is necessary in order to preserve African dignity, African economic and social liberation, and African cultural and spiritual liberation. It is the continuity of the struggle that we start from the time we come here as enslaved people. And what we're fighting for, okay, is our basic human rights and our historical rights. The right for African Guyanese to share power 50-50, power sharing, share economy, okay, in a more equitable way. It's a continuation of that struggle from slavery. 200 plus years of slavery, I mean, we get not a cent. Must mean something. And I know that I have a serious struggle to fight with the PPP and the Indian community on these principal and historical matters. But at the same time, I'm prepared to demonstrate to them and the world that we're different. I stop there.
Brother Ami, if I can bring you back in.
Well, my good friend is right. I not disagree with anything he said when I made my observation. Let me say to him, as one who's been in this business since 1952, in a nation as polarized and tragically divided as Guyana, timing is of the essence. All I'm saying, what I've heard so far, I have no difficulty with. But let us provide a base among our people. What Tacuma just said, let's take that to East Coast, the bush, the interior, West Coast of Beast. Let's persuade our preachers. I attended a funeral the other day And the preacher was taking all sorts of things about what God is and what Jesus is, ignoring the plight of the community in which we live, ignoring the fact that around the very churchyard there was land that needed to be planted up. All I'm saying, let us concentrate during the next period to go to our churches, our mosques where necessary, our communities, particularly in places like West Coast. I was on the naming, spent the entire day, 2 Thursdays ago, the other day. And I was worried about the condition I saw at Hope Town and underneath in a place I campaigned in years ago. We've lost a generation or two thanks to the hemorrhage created by the PPP. You got to win them back. It's not easy. We've got to get them to understand that they've got mirrors, and when they look in the mirror, they must know who they are. So you have a month of each group, and the situation remains the same. We have not helped our people. If we are to help our people, we've got to do the groundwork, provide them with a base to be proud of who they are. A lot of our people are back to the days when they say, if you're white, you're all right. Brown stick around, black stay back. That is no joke these days. And my contention is, let us devote our energies, our intellect, our zeal, and our experience to correcting this serious flaw, particularly in those villages where the other man is using the old technique I talked about, an emerging oligarchy. Look at the people who control the oil, a mono-ethnic oligarchy. You have a prime minister who makes statements. He has no power. We've got to tell that to our people so when he goes into those villages, they can ask him searching questions and remind him of the story I've told about the spook who sat at the door. So as we analyze the situation, my contention is, let's begin at the bottom of our churches, our communities, our teachers, our elders. Get them spending more time trying to lift our young people, telling them the importance of education in a highly technological world. Because whatever we do culturally, we have the pride. At the end of the day, if we don't have the skills and the spunks and the bunks, we will forever be at the bottom of the ladder. And I don't want to end my life in that condition. Let's begin working with our young people, teaching them before we talk about this thing about a month each ethnic group.
But Hami, let me ask you the straight questions. The straight question. Indians are very loud. They're daring the people. First of all, to name Arrival Day, Indian Arrival Day. Second, to have an Indian Arrival Month. If the PPP goes ahead, as they're likely to do, to name it Indian Arrival Day and name a month for Indians, are you going to say to Africans, don't agitate for a month for yourself? Is that what you're saying?
I don't know they're supposed for Indian Arrival, Indian Month. I'm not.
Yes, they've made that call. That is what Ogun responded to.
Well, if that is so, we've got to resist it. It is foolishness. Indian Arrival Month came about for difficult reasons, and the fact that we don't know what date to name for African Arrival Month. What we need to do together, and at the Independence Conference, and I'm one of two who survived that, who's still alive at that conference. And we need to understand this. At the conference in November 1965, and this is important, Peter Degar, supported at the time by Jagan, who was not at the conference, contended that the independence date should be the 1st of August, the date that the Africans got their freedom. Burnham opposed it. We don't want a date for independence granted by the imperial masters, those who dehumanized us for years, and suggested, therefore, a date that the Africans of February 23 struck for their freedom. The problem there was insufficient time to put together the modalities for independence. And so they came up with a proposal to find a date between February and August. And they came up with May. At first, the British officials said, why not May the 24th? But Bonner was so keen to say, that's the Queen's official birthday. But then we found in the records the 26th of May, which provided under the Dutch an advanced constitution. And that is how we got the 26th of May. The point I'm trying to make is this, that all these things need to be taught and told to young people so they develop an appreciation from where we came from. If they are proposing Indian month in isolation, it is an absurdity, a vulgarity, and we must tell them it must not happen. We must steal our people. So if necessary, take the streets and shut the place down. This is not a Mickey Mouse operation, you know. All over the world, you're not going to get progress unless you're prepared to fight. But our people need to have the information and the understanding to fight. They're not going to give us anything on a platter. I've not heard this idea of an Indian month. It's an absurdity, and I hope it is not so.
Oh, Brother Ogun?
Yeah.
Let me bring you back in here. You heard the analysis of Professor Eddie Glaude in his comments on what's happened in America recently. Do you think that what he's saying is relevant to Guyana?
Yes, the professor was making a very deep, profound cultural, and philosophical point. You know, and I think that I think what he's saying is relevant to Guyana and is relevant about any society where African people had experienced slavery and colonialism, and not only African people, other persons who have experienced colonialism and slavery. And because in Guyana, the dominant culture is white people culture, European culture. The dominant institutions are shaped and influenced by Europeans. They don't have to fight a day-to-day battle, to reshape the society in their image. They fight a day-to-day battle internationally and sophisticatedly to keep the country remaining as it is. It is those of us who have been victims of colonialism, has the challenge, to recolonize or reorganize this space that we call Guyana and to make independence meaningful to us, which means that independence is only going to be meaningful to us if all Guyanese could benefit from the independence. And the African Indian problem, while it is the major contradiction that is occupying us politically, is not the real problem. The real problem is our colonial masters, and we get lost in the Indian African struggle and forget who are calling the shots and who are determining in what happened. And this is important because the African condition in Guyana is shaped historically. The Indian condition in Guyana is shaped historically. Africans then enslave indenturized Indians, Indians then enslave Africans. We are all victims of the colonial doings. But now that we live in this space with the so-called independence, which is not fully and real independence, not that we fool ourselves, we got a kind of neo-colonial form of independence which we're trying to give meaning to and to try to translate it into real independence. But we're locked in this do-and-die political, economic, and social battle, to control the country and to deal with the spills, of that control, deal with the kind of benefits of that control. And we haven't dealt with it properly. But I'm saying, put the politics aside for the moment. because politics is just one aspect of human culture. Human culture is more diversified. And people thinking are not only shaped by politics, it is shaped by the wider cultural, engagement, how they think. And the African political deficiency is linked to African cultural deficiency, which is not the work of Indians or Amerindians, it's the work of the European enslavement. And I'm saying to you, the reason why I will have a different approach to politics than persons who haven't come my route is because I am bringing to bear an African philosophical and worldview to my politics. My politics is not defined simply by Eurocentric political constructs. A Eurocentric political view of the state and the nation. My view is influenced by Afrocentric construct. I'm not a major leader, therefore I can't impact the situation, never had power and so forth. But my politics is driven by culture because I understand that what a person or a people becomes is directly linked with the culture which represents their worldview. And if we have the right African worldview, a lot of the things that we're pointing out as problems, our inability to deal with the PPP and all of that, and the inability to do the Eurocentric domination would be much more easier. So while I agree that we got to do everything that Hami says, we have already doing it. I would say 98% of our energies are directed in that direction. What is lacking for the Africans is the cultural cement, the cultural consciousness, the African worldview and philosophical view. We go in the Christian church and tell me, thou shalt not kill. Me African worldview tell me, thou shalt kill when necessary, or thou shalt be killed. I stop here.
Professor Glaude makes the point that we analyze things in the society that are obviously racial outside of the racial context. And thus we give cover to people to carry on and carry out racism without us calling it what it is. What's your thought on that, Barami?
Today, the Chamber of Commerce, the new darling of this government, has made a public statement that Guyana should not sign the Memorandum of Understanding with Trinidad. All the spurious remarks mean nothing. What they are saying, Trinidad is now governed in spite of the hopes of the present Ghana government by a man who's Afrocentric, Keith Rowley. So the Chamber of Commerce, and you know who they are, have an anti-Trinidad, anti-Rowley position. I make this point. We've got to work very hard, diligently, to dismantle this construct of the Chamber of Commerce being in charge of everything. Why you think prices are going up is those same Chamber of Commerce people. And the victims, generally, as I gave an example, are the Afro-Guyanese, particularly our women, who have to work long hours for small salaries. I have no quarrel with what has been said by Tacuma and David. What I'm saying, timing of the essence. Let's build on a foundation that we can move to that stage. And in human history, timing is always important. If we move to that argument, the PP will perhaps grant it, stretch out 1 year, waste our energies on arguing which month should be for Africans, which month should be for the Chinese. They want that. So we don't talk about the oil reserves. We don't talk about the money from oil being evenly distributed. We don't talk about the fact that Ali 2 days ago said they'll give money to 70,000 farmers. I've written a letter today, copied to the Commissioner of Police, to ask him to explain that I've been in this business since 1952. You could not have 70,000 farmers, but that money is to be used to placate their people. I know what I mean by that. And further dig our graves. We've got to resist that in all of the communities. West Coast of Bees, Quarantine, Kanji, in the interior, East Coast. That is where we must concentrate our efforts. I'm doing that in my little ways. And I recommend, and David, you did a fantastic job. Look, we talk about culture. Set aside Tacuma, David Hines, Hamilton Green. You find those names in Africa? No. But I grew up very proud of my name at one time. It's only now I recognize that it was part of a brainwashing process. People like Tacoma, my cousin changed the name from Walter Green to Mawali and so forth. But what we have, particularly in our churches, which I spoke to some young professional Afro-Guyanese, and they were very upset when I told them that the theology they listen to every Sunday is not advancing the welfare of the group, of the tribe. And these are the things we knew. I started talking to certain pastors. Tacuma, do that. David, do that. Call our pastors together because they influence Black people, and tell them that their teaching must move away from the old white people thing. Store not up your treasures on earth, but in heaven. And while we close our eyes to pray, they're gone with everything, the gold and everything. These are the things I'm arguing. Spend the next period strengthening our young people, particularly our young men, so we're able to face the onslaught of a cruel racial capitalist cabal. And as I said, we face the onslaught of an emerging group. Look at the people who control natural resources. That is not by accident. We've got to fight against these things. We've got to call in the leader of opposition and say, look, your business is to be firm and fearless. We're going to support you. But we can't say we're going to support you when you look behind you and see 2 or 3 people. That's the reality of politics. And politics is what defines a nation, whether it's east, west, north, or south. What do you think has happened in Europe today? What do you think happened when the Germans invaded in what has been the fiercest war in recent times, almost 100 years ago, when 800,000 lives were lost, when the Germans tried to take Stalingrad? It was for power. You get power by talking and putting on fancy African clothes. They want that. They want that palliative. They want us to feel happy for a day or two, and they stack the money in the bags. When you go to buy food in the market, from there, people got to pay more. That is what we have to fight against. Get our young people growing more food, growing more shallot. So we say to the government with a voice of power, no longer we import onions. Our people in Andiniming, Hopeton, Ithaca use all the backlands to plant shallot, as is happening in certain other villages.
Brother Ami, let me be straight up with you on this question, as Mark Blanchard puts it, straight up. The institution with the most influence in the African Guyanese community, certainly at the level of politics and economics, is the People's National Congress, your party. I am sure that when you were active in politics, your party had to grapple with the limits of a politics that does not speak directly to the question of race. That is, how do you balance your political trajectory and the question of racial defense of your constituency in a multi-ethnic society in which you are competing for power. That's the challenge of any political party. Are you satisfied? I sought to make the argument that I think the early Burnham government did as much as any other government in Guyana to strive for that balance. But that since Burnham died, your party has thrown Black people under the bus and has gone after crossover votes and this national thing. Do you agree with me?
I agree with that. And David, you're aware of the swords I crossed with Desmond Hoyt. When, first of all, he brought in Jimmy Carter, who I told him was from the Deep South. My mother lived in the South. So I was weaned, nursed on the viciousness of the whites from the South. I told him, don't trust the man from Deep South. He cast my views aside. So after Burnham died, in a sense, we died. We've got to recapture that spirit of competence. Burnham had to navigate between a very stressful Cold War. Today, it is even more challenging. And I'm hoping to speak with the present leader. I've talked to him already, so that he will develop an understanding of what we need to do to put our people in the comfort zone without apologies. At the same time, as a political party, we must remain multi-ethnic. But as you know, Burnham did his best. Carrie Fester was an example. We brought in people from all over the Caribbean, the majority Afrocentric, Cuban, and elsewhere. But there is no Burnham today. What David Hayes and Tacuma must do is begin the process of educating our people so that the other people will respect us. And I say, not being difficult, they must fear us if we move. I was in an Indian business place 2 weeks ago in Robb Street and discussing the rising prices. He said not to worry, the people are not going to go on the streets anymore. This is an Indian businessman.
Yeah.
So once that is around, we will be disrespected, disdained. Nobody respects weakness, whether it's a man or a turkey. And I'm saying to my party that we've got to develop a position where, look, Christianity is about fear and love. You love Jesus, but you're afraid if you do the wrong thing, you're going to a place called hell. And if we don't understand that, and that's why I say the next period is be made with intensive education for young people, particularly our young Black men who have lost the way over the last generation. Look at what happened with this boy who got Black people to kill Black people, the Black clothes. That didn't happen by accident. We got to correct that. It's not easy, but those of us on this program today have a task, a sacred. I do it every day. My wife no longer practices her medicine. Every day we have young men. She's got one who came here, couldn't handle 3-letter word. We're trying to put him through navigate education. In this area where I live, I ask you on your programs to identify those teachers to come out of the comfort zone. Take on 2-3 young men who have the potential, but the parents can't afford to go to extra lessons. It has to begin there. Then we can talk about this thing of a month. That when we talk about a month, it will be based on a solid foundation where the other people respect us. Look, mafia.
Yes, and I take it that you didn't quite understand. We did not propose a month. It's the Indian brothers and sisters who are calling for a month for East Indians. And we are saying that if you are going to give a month for East Indians, you must give a month for Portuguese and Chinese and Africans. We are not the one who
I
say
have no difficulty with that. I didn't hear that.
right.
If
So
that
you
is so, we must say we don't want that nonsense. Because if that is so, it's a clever means of diversion. Those people smart, they want to take us off or talk about oil and gold.
But I mean, I want to get you back to the Burnham model of dealing with a synthesis of race and politics in a multi-ethnic society. Burnham, as you know, had a strong relationship. There was a strong relationship between the PNC and ASCRI. Very strong relationship. Professor Green, Eddie Green, I don't know if it's your family. I know Omowali is your family.
Eddie is my cousin.
There you go. Eddie, you remember that?
Cousin.
You remember that study that Eddie did, in which he found that YSM groups and ASCR groups had almost the identical members. He did a small book in the late 60s, early 70s. So part of Burnham model was a close relationship between the party and the militant cultural group in the society. Part of Burnham model was the use of government, the use of government to uplift people, in particular poor people, economically, the use of government. Thus, do you think that the PNC of today should get back to those roots, the roots of relationship with Black cultural groups and the use of government to empower its supporters?
The answer is absolutely yes. And in fact, I indicated earlier, I'm to have a discussion with the present leader to discuss these matters with him. Because unless that happens, you'll be building on a very, very weak and fragile foundation. You can't build on that, rather. So I agree with you absolutely, David. That is vital, and the PNC has to take the lead as the political entity. And we need to create some other institutions where people understand what has to be done. As I told you, I was in West Coast of Beast 2 weeks ago at Underneming, and the young people didn't know of the opportunities for scholarships available to them. For some reason which I found unbelievable. I'm speaking to some of the churches in that area to tell them that, all right, Jesus, 6 foot, white dude, blonde, all right, no problem with that. I don't want to sound sacrilegious because that'd be dangerous. But you must understand that when that was introduced to the freed Africans, it was not so much to Christianize us. It's to keep us quiet.
Thank you.
Let us say that quietly so that people understand as they pray, as they go to church. Very good. The moral teachings are excellent, but don't forget who they are. Because the other people, I've got some Hindu friends, they teach a different theology in theirs.
Yeah, their religion is 7 days a week. Brother Hani, we have people who are becoming pastors and preachers who do not know the history of Christianity in outposts like Guyana. They have no sense of how Christianity was used. They have no sense of Black Christianity. When the Reverend Richard Allen in Philadelphia walked out of the Episcopal Church and his other people walked out of the Methodist Church, and they formed the first Black church in the Western Hemisphere.
African Methodist Episcopal.
Thank you very much. We have young people who are going on to these Christian schools, not recognizing that our foreparents ensured that we had two Christianity. The Black Christianity coming out of the Black church with a Black theology, Maccabee version, and the other theology. They have no sense of the relationship between race and Christianity. They are in big trouble. education has to be just not to the masses, but the leaders who do not understand the first thing about Christianity. The Seventh Day Adventist Church was one of the first churches to introduce Christianity to Black people. The English Church and Roman Catholic Church hid Christianity from Black people because they feared that the positive tenets of Christianity we would get. So our religious leaders are really don't know anything about Christianity, and I say that with respect. Anyhow, Ogunseye.
But David, just put this one in. That is our task, a noble task, because there's a book written, White Church, Black Priest.
Yeah.
I don't know if you read it.
Yes.
And it's a very touchy subject, you know, David. I've raised a few times. People get very emotional when you suggest to them that the theology is misguided and that it was born out of the slave master's need.
Yeah.
But it's because people from the cradle grew up accepting certain things.
Yes.
So this is a difficult one. I've tried it a few times, and I quietly said to people, let's recast our theology so that as you preach and you see dirt outside, go and plant it up. Those are the things they've done.
Yes. Yeah. No, I move around the church army. And the congregational church is about the only church at the time to deal with the history of the church and religion within the context of our history. The Seventh Day Adventists, like I said, played a pivotal role in what they call in America the opening, the Great Awakening. When the enslaved people were first introduced to Christianity, it was the Baptist Church, the Seventh Day Adventists, the other Revivalist Church who played that role. You talk to any Seventh Day Adventist preacher and ask him about the history of the Seventh Day Adventists as it relates to race, and they wouldn't be able to answer you because the church has moved away from its roots. And I say that with all respect to my family and so on who are Seventh Day Adventists. They don't know about the revolutionary history of their own church. So we're in big trouble. Ogunseye.
But the problem is even more fundamental. The problem is even more fundamental than that. I mean, most African persons who preach in the church doesn't recognize that the church become a church, an organized church in North Africa. And a lot of the ideological tenets of the church, people like St. Augustine and others who shaped it. And the first two human beings to be thrown in the lion's den by the Romans were two African women. I can't remember the name right now, but the history as it record. It is the early Christian church was built by Africans. But the Europeans would not bring that liberation kind of Christianity. The Christianity that come to us is after the European conquer Africa and conquer the rest of the world. They bring a Christianity based upon King James, and the early Bible used to got the King James version, King of France, Ireland, defender the faith, etc., right in front the introduction. But so our problem is more deep and fundamental. But I have to go to pick with Hami a bit. He said that societies are driven by the politics. And this is a fundamental different conception. That's a European conception. We in African views of politics is shaped by culture. When you see a political person behave in a certain way, you have to understand his cultural upbringing, his cultural tenets, what inform his political action. His philosophy is cultural. So it is not politics that drive it, it's culture drive politics. It's not the other way around. And these are important differences.
Yes.
Because it makes a lot of difference how you engage. What I don't understand is why Comrade Hami believe that in pursuing this discussion, we will spend 3 weeks on it. We just have to argue, we position on the month, and we exit the debate. We don't have to be engaged in it. It's not a life and death debate for us. But we must put in the historical record that if the Indians want a month, and if the government is going to give them a month, Africans and others are entitled to a month, and exit the debate. I can't see how this is going to engage us in any long row with them over the matter. And we'll go back to the business.
Go ahead.
You see, I'm trying to be very profound with the African condition, because these are matters that engage me from the age of 16. You know, now I'm 70. There's a lot of age. I've been dealing with these matters day to day. And I'm going to give some simple examples, one or two simple examples. My late sister, I love her very much. She was a teacher, my mistress, or a deputy headmistress. So I only mentioned that to show that I'm not dealing with somebody who is supposed to know. And I had my business in the market, you know, I had a grocery. Anytime she broke, she would call me, I would give you money. And so she knows she brother. But she never, ever bring a list. She go and shop at Guyana stores. And I have other Indian persons who have similar things in the market. And every Saturday, all them Indian family coming up with the list and they dropping it off. Now, that is a cultural deficiency, my sister. I love her. But I never make it an issue with her. But I could reproduce these deficiencies a million times. I used to, for many years, I've been producing kite frames and sell it wholesale and retail in Kitty Market. I developed a relationship with the Indian stall holder, and he used to take my frames and sell, you know, and pay and so and so. And a lot of young people and that, you know, youngsters coming and buy the frame. They say, oh, man, I ain't buying from you again. Sitar frame better than you. A Sitar selling me frame. I mean, so I have been studying these things very profoundly. And I'm telling you, I remember when I was, I changed my name. In Africa, you have the Cultural Revolution in the 70s. I had a fight with some of my family up and now still call me Colin Young. They can't bring them out of the tongue around Tacuma, Ogunseye. And I remember while I used to go house to house and share day clean in Kitty. Whenever you tell an African what your name, hostility. When the Indian, they listen with interest and they ask him more. They're questioning you. They had a deep appreciation of certain cultural realities. And I'm saying that one of our deficiencies in politics is not so much we are politically deficient. In fact, we vote for one party for the last 60 years. I don't know, you could ask for more African political unity than what we get. Almost a man. Where we get beat is our cultural deficiency to inform our politics. And that is why I will argue, if we could repair some percentage of African cultural and philosophical deficiency, we automatically strengthen the political behavior. I, as a conscious African, will never sell my soul to the PPP. I will never do it. I'd rather die in poverty. I'd rather ride my bicycle till I'm dead. This is deep conviction not from politics, but cultural conviction. I remember I worked close to the PPP when they came to power in 92. And I'm saying some of these things for the first time. One of the persons who I worked with, the PPP over the river, he was a doctor, I think a chest doctor. He was a political person in charge of the PPP over the river. Mutinlala or something. I can't remember his brother's name now. But he was a doctor, he knew me.
Mutilal, Dr. Mutilal,
Mutilal.
Bostonian.
Yeah. And he so And he saw me in Royal Woodworking. He watched me from head to toes. He said, Ogun must come in, let me see what we could do for you. No? He said, Ogun, come in, let me see what we could do for you. I mean, he didn't know how he offended my African dignity. And that is the problem I have with a lot of PP people. Many PP leaders of the whole line time with Jagdio because I don't know Jagdio. And even to the extent I know Jagdio was a very friendly engagement with Jagdio at the activity that they had an African head of state came and we were all put up, at the ex-Burnham residence. And Jagdio, in the PVP side and the WPS side, put up. And Jagdio, stretch with his hand and we shake hand. And he said, I see a name in the recognition book of Burnham produced. And that is the closest I have had with Jagdio, anything political. So, but with the old people like Gail and all of them, Rui and all of them, the problem I have with them is that they have developed a racial contempt for Africans. And this racial contempt of getting from bad to worse on the Jagdio and after the death of Achedi. And they're taking advantage of African cultural deficiency. What should they do to our young people with the music and the what the last thing they had was nasty something? What I remember. And every minute of the day, they're playing for our weaknesses, organizing all kinds of foolishness for our young people. And our young people tore up in thousands. That is not simply a political problem. It is a cultural problem. And we have to spend time repairing this. And the party could do quite a lot more than even the traditional cultural groups. Because the party already have an mathematical hearing of the African community. And the African community developed some commitment and respect and trust with the leadership, because if they didn't have they could hold on to the leadership, and the leadership will have the same control over them for 60 years or how much ever years. So they have to understand, PNC people have to understand, you can't, to change the things that we talk about, we got to defeat the people politically. We got to defeat them politically, either electorally or otherwise. And to defeat them requires an African with a different kind of thinking than the present thinking. A politics that is driven by a different thinking. Now, for example, I remember was it 2006 elections. We had a meeting at BV, and I spoke and I made the point that the African approach to these elections, in a nutshell, we going into them. If we win, we're gonna offer power sharing. If we lose, we're gonna fight for power sharing. And it took the press. And I remember somebody asked Granger about it. And he said, Ogunseye don't talk for me. And if you understand the logic of that, is that it recognizes that election is an ethnic census. It recognizes that we're likely to lose. That election, either win or you lose. But we wanted that African votes to mean something, so we could correct the African economic and social deficiency. We want power sharing. No, that commitment to that is not simply a question of politics in the conventional sense. It requires a cultural shift, a love for your people in a way that is not reflected in conventional politics, which emphasize the party as against the people. We have a duty to give to the generation or the next generation of Africans who coming here a society in which they share power politically based on parity and power sharing, economically where we have to fight for parity and move the African condition from less than 10% of the economy. And these have to be open African questions, which we have to push the politics to accept. Too long, the politics have been determining everything for the African community. All
right, brother Tacuma Ogunseye there. along with Brother Hamilton Green. We've gone way over time. As usual, once we get into the religion thing, we get into trouble. Mr. Randy Mingo is saying, Dr. Hines, speak about what you know and not for Adventist members and what they know. Let me tell you that we know where, who, why, when, and what we are. And we are deep in our history, so sir, do not generalize and address Adventists as knowledgeable as people. There we go. That is part of our problem. My brother Randy, I am not attacking the Adventist church. I'm attacking a generation of pioneers who become preachers, political leaders, teachers, professors. That's what I'm talking about. A generation is removed from their history. In fact, I think I was doing the Adventist Church of everybody saying it's a church that came out of a revolution in the Black community. One of the first churches to introduce Christianity to Black people. A revivalist church. I was not attacking Adventists, but you see how quick you all are to defend the church. Please, Mr. Randy, defend Black people the same way. And when you go to church on Saturday, tell your preacher, preach a sermon on the role of the church in an environment of racial discrimination. Whenever I go in a church, and I just go study church, right? Both to worship, but I also go to funerals, and so I always listen to sermons, because sermons tell me a lot about where the thinking of the church is. Ask your preacher to preach a sermon on the role of the church in a society of racial discrimination. That's what the Seventh-day Adventist has its roots on. I mean, your closing statement.
I agree with you, David, and I think we need to discuss this matter in depth. I'll call you during the week. Tacuma, I'll call you, because what we need to do is step by step. If each of us takes 6 persons, persuade them per day, multiply 6 by 7, that's 42 souls a week, and they multiply. That's a beginning. And so that we can seek liberation. That is my position. On the question raised, if that is true, it is absurdity. You can't have a month for one group and ignore the others. So that to me is a non-negotiable. And I remain committed so that the sacrifices and sufferings of my noble ancestors, whose bones are rattling at the bottom of the Atlantic for justice, is not in vain.
Thank you very much, Brother Hamilton Green, Brother Tacuma Ogunseye.
I want to say that 90% of what Comrade Hamilton Green said, I fully agree with. You know, we don't have much a difference is on those details, but I still want to say that we're presenting the problem about the African condition and what we got to do, like if we've been doing nothing. We have been trying to deal with this problem for years, for centuries. And the more recent ASCRIA did work, more recent AGDA doing work and continue to do work. We have a number of African organizations that are doing some amount of work. We have all kinds of activity. But it is proven inefficient or inadequate given the persuasive domination of politics driven by the PNC. I'm talking about the African community. The PNC, if you really want to change the dynamics, the cultural dynamics, the PNC got to take a different attitude about African interests and African culture and so forth and so forth. And it will liberate a whole set of energies in the African community, which we in the cultural movement have to fight against. I'm telling you, if you ask Sister Violet to come on this program, you should invite her at some point to talk about these matters. The opposition you get comes from PNC people on the ground, apart from the general backwardness in the African community and so forth and so forth. But I'm telling you, and I'm saying that if you want to liberate the cultural and the political energies of our people, the PNC has to make a distinguished shift in its politics. And it has to start with approach to elections. Winner take all elections is not in the interest of African people. It compromises our liberation, economic, politically, and spiritually, and culturally. We're playing the game the same way the white people want me to play the game. And we have to bring an African worldview to this politics. And I'm telling you, the day that they could make the transition, Guyana is a changed place.
And there we go. We certainly had the period of 1964 to 1971, when there was the break in relations between ASCRI and the PNC. But that period, 1964 to 71, go back and study it. And you will see some of the great strides in the Black community were made because the party had a sense of what was needed culturally in our community. And that is why I say the Burnham model is one that needs revisiting by the present PNC. And of course, Elder Hamilton Green certainly agrees with me, says that he will speak with the young people who are leading the party now, well, the younger people who are leading the party now. But Ogunseye, your point is on spot. Brother Ami, Brother Tacuma, good night. Thanks for coming on and enriching. And Ami, I look out for your call. Good night, and see you all tomorrow night. Bye.
Call you both so we can chat some more.
Wonderful.
God bless.
Yeah.
Okay.
Good night. See you all tomorrow night.
Exactly.
Oh, America's not unique in its sins as a country. We're not unique in our evils, to be honest with you. I think where we may be singular is our a refusal to acknowledge them and the legends and myths we tell about our inherent, goodness to hide and cover and conceal so that we can maintain a kind of willful ignorance that protects our innocence. See, the thing is that when the Tea Party was happening, we were saying, pundits, oh, it's just about economic populism. It's not about race. When people knew, social scientists were already writing that what was driving the Tea Party were anxieties about demographic shifts, that the country was changing, that they were seeing these racially ambiguous babies on Cheerios commercials, that the country wasn't quite feeling like it was a white nation anymore. And people were screaming from the top of their lungs, yo, this is not just simply economic populism. This is the ugly underbelly of the country. See, the thing is this, and I'll say this and I'll take the hit on it. There are communities that have had to bear the brunt of America confronting, white Americans confronting the danger of their innocence. And it happens every generation. So somehow we have to kind of, oh my God, is this who we are? And just again, here's another generation of babies. Think about it, that 2-year-old had his bones broken by 2 parents trying to shield him from being killed. A woman who has been married to this man for as long as I've been on the planet almost, lost her husband. For what? And so what we know is that the country has been playing politics for a long time on this hatred. We know this. So it's easy for us to place it all on Donald Trump's shoulders. It's easy for us to place Pittsburgh on his shoulders. It's easy for me to place Charlottesville on his shoulders. It's easy for us to place El Paso on his shoulders. This is us. And if we're going to get past this, we can't blame it on him. He's a manifestation of the ugliness that's in us. I've had the privilege of growing up in a tradition that didn't believe in the myths and the legends because we had to bear the brunt of them. Either we're going to change, Nicole, or we're going to do this again and again, and babies are going to have to grow up without mothers and fathers, uncles and aunts, friends, while we're trying to convince white folk to finally leave behind a history that will maybe, or embrace a history that might set them free from being white. Finally.
What else?
Lord help us.
Please help keep Politics 101 on social media and broadcast television. If you are in North America, please donate via Cash App or PayPal.
If you are in Guyana and the Caribbean and don't have access to Cash App and PayPal, email your pledge to dhines6106@aol.com and we will direct you how to get your donation to us. Thank you in advance for your donation.